My former wife cheated on me with a masseur, and my current wife's child was kidnapped. This is a long story, but I think I need to start from the beginning to give you the full picture. My name is Jake, and I thought I had my life together. But recently, everything has been turned upside down. I met Sarah when I was 25. We both worked in the same office building, though in different departments. She was this vibrant, beautiful woman with an infectious laugh. I was instantly smitten. After a few weeks of awkward glances and small talk in the elevator, I finally mustered up the courage to ask her out. To my surprise, she said yes. Our first date was at a cozy little Italian restaurant downtown. We talked for hours, and it felt like we had known each other forever. She had a way of making me feel special, like I was the only person in the room. One date turned into 2, then 3, and before I knew it, we were inseparable. A year into our relationship, I proposed to her at the same restaurant where we had our first date. She said yes, and I felt like the luckiest man alive. We had a beautiful wedding, surrounded by friends and family. Everything felt perfect, like a dream come true. But as they say, reality is often stranger than fiction. For the first few years, our marriage was blissful. We bought a house in a nice neighborhood, got a dog named Max, and settled into what I thought was a perfect life. Sarah was a yoga instructor, and I had climbed the ranks in my job, becoming a project manager. We were the picture-perfect couple, or so I thought. Sarah was always very into health and wellness. She would often go to spas, have massages, and take yoga retreats. I encouraged it because it made her happy, and I trusted her completely. She had this one massage therapist, Tony, who she raved about constantly. She said he was a miracle worker for her stress and back pain. I didn't think much of it after all. A good massage therapist can be hard to find. Fast forward to a few months ago. Sarah started acting differently. She was distant, often coming home late from her appointments and being glued to her phone. I tried to brush it off as her just being busy, but something in my gut told me something was off. One night, she said she was going to see Tony for a late massage session. She seemed nervous, which was unusual. Call it intuition or paranoia, but I decided to follow her. I waited until she left and then drove to Tony's studio. I parked a little down the street, out of sight, and waited. About half an hour later, I saw them through the window. At first, it seemed like a normal massage session, but then things took a turn. Tony's hands were all over her, not in a professional way, but intimately. They were laughing, touching, and then he started undressing her. I felt my stomach drop, but I couldn't look away. I was frozen, unable to process what I was seeing. Tony lifted her onto the massage table, and they started having sex right there. The room was dimly lit, but I could see everything clearly. Sarah was moaning, completely lost in the moment, and Tony was taking full advantage. They moved together as if they had done this many times before. It was raw, passionate, and completely devastating to watch. I felt a surge of anger and pain, but managed to hold back my immediate reaction. Instead, I drove home and waited. When Sarah came back, I confronted her. She denied it at first, but when I told her I had seen everything, she broke down and admitted it. She tried to explain that it just happened and that she didn't mean for it to go this far, but her words felt hollow, and my trust in her was shattered. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't eat, sleep, or think straight. The woman I had devoted my life to had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I decided to file for divorce. There was no coming back from this for me. The betrayal was too deep. Divorce proceedings are a special kind of hell. Sarah tried to make amends, begging for forgiveness and another chance. She claimed she was confused and made a mistake, but I couldn't see past the betrayal. We went through mediation, where the facade of civility quickly crumbled. She tried to claim more than her fair share of our assets, which only fueled my anger. During the proceedings, more shocking truths came to light. I found out that Tony wasn't the only one. Sarah had been unfaithful multiple times with different men. This revelation broke me even more. How could I have been so blind? As if things couldn't get worse, my parents, who had always been supportive, started acting strangely too. They kept telling me to forgive Sarah and work things out. At first I thought they were just trying to keep the peace, but then I discovered the real reason. My father had been having an affair with Sarah's mother for years. They had both been living a lie, and now they were trying to manipulate me into forgiving Sarah to keep their secret safe. When I confronted them, they were unapologetic. They said it was none of my business and that their affair had nothing to do with my marriage. The betrayal from my own parents was a punch to the gut. I felt utterly alone, with no one to trust. And that's where I am now, trying to navigate this mess. I'm not sure what my next steps should be, but I need to find a way to move forward. It had been a few weeks since the divorce proceedings began. I was doing my best to keep it together, but every day felt like a battle. The betrayal from Sarah and the bombshell revelation about my parents had left me reeling. I had cut ties with almost everyone, trying to piece my life back together in solitude. One evening, as I was sitting on the couch, lost in thought, I heard a loud banging on my front door. Startled, I got up to see who it was. Before I could even reach the door, it burst open, and Ted, Sarah's brother, stormed in. His face was red with anger, and his eyes were wild. Ted immediately attacked me, throwing punches and yelling incoherently about how I had ruined their lives. I tried to defend myself, but he was much stronger and angrier than I had anticipated. He knocked me to the ground and continued his assault, kicking me in the ribs and hitting me in the face. I could taste blood and felt my vision blur, but I managed to kick him off me for a moment and scramble to my feet. As I backed away, trying to catch my breath, Ted continued his tirade, blaming me for exposing all the family secrets and destroying their reputation. His rage was uncontrollable, and I realized he wasn't going to stop. Desperation gave me strength, and I fought back with everything I had, managing to land a few punches that stunned him. Just as it seemed like I might be able to turn the tide, 2 police officers burst into the house, having been called by a neighbor who heard the commotion. They quickly subdued Ted and pulled him away from me. As he was being dragged out, he shouted that this wasn't over and that I would pay for what I had done. In the aftermath of the attack, I was taken to the hospital for my injuries. The doctors were concerned about a possible concussion and broken ribs, but I was more focused on the chaos that my life had become. While I was recovering, I received a call from my lawyer with more bad news. Sarah was claiming that I had been abusive during our marriage and was fighting for full ownership of our house and assets. The accusations were baseless, but the legal battle was going to be long and grueling. A few days later, while still in the hospital, I received another shocking piece of news. The police had discovered that Sarah and Tony were involved in an embezzlement scheme at her yoga studio. They had been laundering money through the business and hiding it in offshore accounts. The investigation was ongoing, but it looked like they were facing serious jail time. As I tried to process all this information, I got a visit from an old friend, Mark. He had heard about my situation and came to offer support. Mark and I had been close in college but had drifted apart over the years. Seeing him again was a welcome relief. He filled me in on what had been happening in the outside world, and for a few hours, I felt a semblance of normalcy. However, the calm didn't last. One night, as I was getting ready to leave the hospital, a nurse handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter from an anonymous source, warning me that I was still in danger. The letter claimed that Sarah and Tony weren't the only ones involved in the embezzlement scheme. There were others, higher up, who were worried that I knew too much and would stop at nothing to silence me. I showed the letter to the police, who assured me they would look into it, but I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. I decided to take matters into my own hands and started digging into Sarah's business and connections. What I found was more than I could have ever imagined. Sarah's yoga studio was just a front for a larger criminal organization involved in money laundering, drug trafficking, and even human trafficking. I realized that my life was in serious danger and I couldn't trust anyone. I packed my bags and went into hiding, trying to stay one step ahead of the people who were after me. Mark helped me set up a safe house and provided me with the resources I needed to stay off the grid. As I pieced together the full extent of the criminal network, I documented everything and prepared to go to the authorities. But every day was a struggle, as I had to constantly look over my shoulder and move frequently to avoid being caught. The situation escalated when I found a tracker hidden in my car. Someone knew my movements and was getting closer. I had to abandon the car and move on foot, staying in motels and using cash to avoid detection. The stress and fear were overwhelming, but I knew I couldn't stop until I exposed the truth and cleared my name. And that's where I am now, constantly on the run, trying to navigate this mess. I'm not sure what my next steps should be, but I need to find a way to bring down this criminal network and finally get my life back. The days on the run blurred together. Every corner I turned, every shadow I saw, my paranoia grew. My only constant was Mark, who was risking everything to help me. He kept me informed about the ongoing investigation and the developments in Sarah and Tony's case. The authorities were closing in on the larger criminal network, and arrests were being made, but it was a slow and dangerous process. One morning, Mark called with urgent news. Tony had been arrested and was facing multiple charges, including embezzlement, money laundering, and drug trafficking. He had turned on Sarah, providing evidence against her in exchange for a reduced sentence. Sarah was now the primary target of the investigation, and her world was falling apart. With Tony's cooperation, the authorities were able to dismantle significant parts of the criminal organization. Several high-ranking members were arrested and more charges were being filed daily. Despite the progress, I knew my battle was far from over. I still had to stay hidden and protect myself from those who wanted to silence me. One evening, while staying in yet another rundown motel, I received an unexpected visitor. My Aunt Margaret showed up at my door. She was a bitter woman who had always held a grudge against me for reasons I never fully understood. We had little contact over the years, but now she stood before me, her face twisted with anger and resentment. Without a word, she pushed her way into the room and slammed the door behind her. I could see the hatred in her eyes as she accused me of ruining the family. Margaret had always been close to my parents and blamed me for exposing their secrets and causing a rift in the family. Before I could react, she lunged at me, her fists flying. The initial shock left me momentarily stunned, and she landed several blows before I could defend myself. I tried to fend her off without hurting her, but she was relentless. Her nails clawed at my face, and she screamed obscenities, blaming me for everything that had gone wrong. In the midst of the struggle, Margaret pulled out a small, concealed weapon, a taser. She jabbed it into my side, sending a jolt of electricity through my body. I collapsed to the floor, unable to move as she stood over me, her chest heaving with rage. "You deserve to suffer for what you've done," she spat. "You're a disgrace to this family." As I lay there, paralyzed and in pain, she rifled through my belongings, looking for anything she could use to further ruin my life. She found the documents I had been compiling, evidence of the criminal network and Sarah's involvement. With a malicious grin, she stuffed them into her bag and left, leaving me helpless on the floor. It took several minutes for the effects of the taser to wear off enough for me to move. I knew I had to act fast. Margaret now had the evidence I needed to clear my name and expose the criminals. If she handed it over to the wrong people, it would be destroyed, and I would be left with nothing. I called Mark and explained the situation. He sprang into action, using his connections to track Margaret's movements. Meanwhile, I gathered what strength I had and set out to find her. It wasn't long before Mark located her at a small, out-of-the-way cafe. I made my way there, my mind racing with plans to retrieve the documents. When I arrived, I spotted Margaret sitting alone at a table, casually sipping coffee as if she hadn't just assaulted me and stolen crucial evidence. I approached her cautiously, trying to remain unnoticed. As I got closer, I saw an opportunity. Her bag was open, the documents partially visible inside. Taking a deep breath, I made my move. I grabbed the bag and ran, hearing her angry shouts behind me. I didn't stop, weaving through the streets until I was sure I had lost her. Exhausted and battered, I found a secluded spot and checked the contents of the bag. The documents were all there, intact. Relieved but still wary, I contacted Mark. He arranged for a safe place where I could hide until we could hand over the evidence to the authorities. It was a small victory, but I knew the fight was far from over. In the following weeks, the evidence I provided helped the authorities make significant breakthroughs in their investigation. Sarah was arrested and charged with multiple crimes. Her trial was a media spectacle, and the truth about her double life was laid bare for everyone to see. Margaret, realizing the gravity of her actions, tried to flee, but she was caught and charged with assault and obstruction of justice. Her hatred for me had driven her to desperate measures, and now she was facing the consequences. The criminal network continued to unravel, with more arrests being made and more victims being freed. The authorities praised my courage and determination, but I knew it had come at a great personal cost. My life had been shattered, my trust in those closest to me broken. As I slowly began to rebuild, I remained cautious, always looking over my shoulder. The scars from this ordeal would never fully heal, but I was determined to move forward. With the support of true friends like Mark, I started to see a glimmer of hope for the future. And that's where I am now, still navigating the aftermath of the chaos, but with a renewed sense of purpose. There are still many challenges ahead, but I know I have the strength to face them. Months passed, and slowly life began to return to a semblance of normalcy. The legal battles subsided, and I found myself with a new sense of freedom, albeit with scars from the past. It was during this time that I met Emily. Emily was a breath of fresh air. We met at a mutual friend's party, and from the moment we started talking, I felt an instant connection. She had a warm, genuine smile and a kindness in her eyes that put me at ease. We talked for hours that night, sharing stories and laughing more than I had in a long time. Our first date was a simple coffee at a local cafe. It was refreshing to spend time with someone without the weight of my past looming over us. Emily was understanding and patient, never prying into my previous life unless I brought it up. She was an artist, passionate about painting and photography, and she had an infectious enthusiasm for life. We started seeing each other regularly. We enjoyed long walks in the park, weekend getaways to the countryside, and quiet evenings cooking dinner together. Emily had a way of making even the most mundane activities feel special. Her creativity and zest for life reignited a spark in me that I thought I had lost forever. After a year of dating, I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. I planned a special proposal, renting out a small art gallery for the evening. I filled it with her favorite flowers and displayed some of her artwork along with photos from our time together. As she walked through the gallery, taking in the memories, I got down on one knee and asked her to marry me. Her eyes filled with tears of joy as she said yes. Our wedding was a beautiful, intimate ceremony with close friends and family. We chose a picturesque vineyard as our venue, and the day was filled with love, laughter, and dancing under the stars. It was the happiest day of my life, and I felt like I was finally leaving the darkness behind. A few months after our wedding, Emily and I received the wonderful news that we were expecting a baby. The pregnancy brought us even closer together. We spent countless hours preparing for the arrival of our little one, from decorating the nursery to attending parenting classes. Emily's excitement was contagious, and I found myself eagerly anticipating the new chapter in our lives. The day our daughter Lily was born was indescribable. Holding her in my arms for the first time, I felt an overwhelming surge of love and protectiveness. Emily and I were over the moon, and our little family felt complete. The first few months were a blur of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and baby giggles. Despite the exhaustion, I cherished every moment. But then, the unthinkable happened. Lily was 3 months old when she was taken from us. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, and we had taken her to the park for a picnic. The park was bustling with families enjoying the warm weather. We spread out a blanket under a large oak tree, and Emily took out her sketchbook while I played with Lily. At one point, Emily needed to use the restroom, so I stayed behind with Lily. I was distracted for just a moment, answering a text message from Mark, who was checking in on us. When I looked up, Lily was gone. Panic set in immediately. I frantically searched the area, calling out her name, but there was no sign of her. Emily returned, and I could see the fear in her eyes as I told her what had happened. We both started searching the park, asking everyone we saw if they had seen our daughter. Minutes felt like hours, and the park seemed to close in around us. We called the police, and they arrived quickly, setting up a perimeter and questioning witnesses. Several people reported seeing a man and a woman near our blanket around the time Lily disappeared. They described the couple as average-looking, nothing particularly distinctive about them, which made the search even more challenging. The police took our statements and assured us they were doing everything possible to find Lily. Emily was inconsolable, and I felt a mix of helplessness and rage. We stayed at the park well into the night, hoping for any sign of our daughter. But there was nothing. Days turned into weeks, and there were still no leads. The police continued their investigation, and the media picked up the story, turning it into a nationwide search. We appeared on television, pleading for any information that could lead to Lily's safe return. One night, as I was going through the security footage from the park for the 100th time, I noticed something I had missed before. In the background of one of the clips, I saw a car parked near the park entrance. The car had a distinctive bumper sticker, a logo for a local animal shelter. I had a gut feeling this could be a clue. I took the footage to the police, and they followed up on the lead. It turned out the car belonged to a couple who had recently adopted a child under suspicious circumstances. The adoption papers were forged, and the couple matched the descriptions given by the witnesses in the park. The police conducted a raid on the couple's home, and to our immense relief, they found Lily. She was unharmed, but the sight of her in that unfamiliar place broke my heart. Emily and I rushed to the police station to be reunited with our daughter. The moment I held her in my arms again, I felt a wave of emotions, relief, joy, and an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The couple was arrested and charged with kidnapping, and the investigation revealed a larger network involved in illegal adoptions. The authorities dismantled the operation, ensuring that no other families would suffer the same ordeal. As we brought Lily home, I realized how precious and fragile life is. The experience had changed us, but it also made us stronger. Emily and I were more determined than ever to protect our family and cherish every moment together. We continued to work with the authorities, providing information to help bring others involved in the illegal adoption ring to justice. The media attention eventually faded, and we were able to focus on rebuilding our lives. Our bond as a family grew even stronger. Emily and I leaned on each other for support, and we made sure Lily was surrounded by love and security. We moved to a new home, far away from the memories of the past, and started fresh. In time, we welcomed another child into our family, a baby boy named Ethan. Watching Lily and Ethan grow up together, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known before. Despite the trials we had faced, we had come out on the other side stronger and more united. Life had thrown us more challenges than I could have ever imagined. But with Emily by my side, I knew we could face anything together. And as I looked at our children playing happily in the yard, I felt a renewed sense of hope and gratitude for the family we had built. Our journey was far from over, but with love, resilience, and the support of those who truly cared for us, I knew we could overcome whatever came our way. As we settled into our new home, life began to take on a sense of normalcy. Emily and I found comfort in our new surroundings, and our children, Lily and Ethan, were thriving. We took walks in the nearby park, attended community events, and slowly started to build a new life for ourselves. Our new neighborhood was charming, filled with families and friendly faces. One of our closest neighbors was a man named Dave. He lived alone in the house next door, and although he was polite, there was something about him that seemed off. He often kept to himself and had a disheveled appearance. At first, we thought he might just be a private person, but soon his behavior began to raise concerns. We first noticed something was wrong when we saw people coming and going from Dave's house at odd hours. There were times when loud music and strange smells emanated from his place, but we tried to mind our own business. One evening, however, we heard shouting coming from his backyard. I went over to check if everything was all right and found Dave in a heated argument with a stranger. They quickly dispersed when they saw me, and Dave brushed it off, saying it was just a misunderstanding. Despite these odd occurrences, we tried to give Dave the benefit of the doubt. We wanted to be good neighbors and not jump to conclusions. However, things took a turn for the worse when one night, Emily and I were awakened by the sound of breaking glass. I rushed downstairs to find Dave standing in our living room holding a knife. His eyes were wild, and he was clearly under the influence of something. He accused us of stealing his stash, claiming we had taken his marijuana plants. His voice was frantic, and he waved the knife around, making wild threats. Emily grabbed the children and locked themselves in the bedroom while I tried to reason with him. I assured him we had no idea what he was talking about, but he was beyond reason. Just as things seemed to be escalating out of control, the police arrived. Our neighbor across the street had seen Dave break in and called 911. The officers managed to subdue him and take him away. It was a terrifying experience, and it left us shaken. We later learned that Dave had a history of drug addiction and had been spiraling out of control for some time. His paranoia had led him to believe we were somehow involved in his imaginary theft. In the days that followed, we took extra precautions to ensure our safety. We installed security cameras and strengthened the locks on our doors and windows. The incident had brought back memories of the chaos we had escaped from, but we were determined not to let it derail our new beginning. A few weeks later, we received another shock. Emily's sister, Lisa, came to visit us. She had been living abroad for several years and decided to return to be closer to family. Her arrival was a pleasant surprise, and it was heartwarming to see Emily reconnect with her sister. However, Lisa's visit soon brought to light a betrayal that would test our family's bonds. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, Lisa revealed that she had been in contact with Sarah, my ex-wife, and had been providing her with information about our new life. Emily was devastated. She couldn't understand why her sister would betray her trust like that. Lisa explained that Sarah had reached out to her, claiming she wanted to make amends and be a part of Lily and Ethan's lives. Emily felt torn between her sister and the need to protect our family. We had worked so hard to move on from the past, and now it felt like we were being dragged back into it. I could see the pain in Emily's eyes as she tried to process the betrayal. Lisa apologized profusely, insisting she had only wanted to help Sarah, not realizing the full extent of the damage she was causing. Despite the tension, Emily and Lisa eventually reconciled. Lisa promised never to contact Sarah again and to support us fully in keeping our family safe and secure. It was a difficult time, but we managed to navigate through it together. Around this time, we also received news about my parents. My father had fallen seriously ill, and my mother reached out seeking reconciliation. It was a complicated situation. Despite their betrayal, they were still my parents, and I couldn't ignore their plea for help. After discussing it with Emily, we decided to visit them. Seeing my father bedridden and frail was a sobering experience. My mother was a shadow of her former self, worn down by guilt and regret. They both apologized for their actions, expressing deep remorse for the pain they had caused. It was a lot to take in, but Emily and I chose to forgive them, if only to bring some peace to the family. Life slowly began to settle down again. Emily and I focused on our children, creating happy memories and building a strong foundation for their future. We became more involved in the community, making new friends and strengthening our support network. One afternoon, while Emily and I were gardening, our new neighbor, Jane, from 2 houses down, stopped by. She was a kind and warm woman who had quickly become a friend. She mentioned that she had seen Dave around the neighborhood recently, looking even more disheveled and agitated than before. Her words sent a shiver down my spine, but I tried to brush it off, hoping that he was getting the help he needed. A few days later, as we were getting ready for bed, I heard a noise outside. I looked out the window and saw Dave lurking near our garage. My heart raced as I watched him fumble with something in his hands. I alerted Emily and called the police, fearing another confrontation. The police arrived quickly and apprehended Dave before he could do any harm. They found him in possession of a large knife and a makeshift lockpicking kit. This time, Dave was taken into custody and charged with attempted burglary and possession of a weapon. It was a relief to know he was no longer a threat, but the incident left a lasting impact on our sense of security. As the months passed, Emily and I continued to focus on our family and rebuilding our lives. Lily and Ethan were growing up fast, and their laughter filled our home with joy. Emily's art career was flourishing, and I found solace in my work, finding new projects and challenges that kept me engaged. One summer evening, we decided to throw a neighborhood barbecue to strengthen our bonds with our new friends and neighbors. It was a lively event, filled with laughter, good food, and a sense of community. As the night wore on, I looked around at the faces of those who had become part of our lives and felt a deep sense of gratitude. However, life has a way of throwing unexpected challenges our way. One evening, as Emily and I were putting the kids to bed, we heard a knock on the door. It was the police. They informed us that they had discovered a plot by a group of criminals to kidnap children from affluent neighborhoods. They had intercepted communications that suggested Lily might be a target. Our hearts sank. The thought of losing Lily again was unbearable. The police assured us they were taking every precaution to protect our family, but the fear and anxiety returned, threatening to overshadow our newfound peace. Determined not to let fear control our lives, Emily and I took additional measures to secure our home. We installed a state-of-the-art security system and worked closely with the police to ensure our family's safety. Despite the lingering fear, we refused to let it dictate our happiness. In the midst of this turmoil, Emily discovered she was pregnant again. The news brought a mixture of joy and apprehension. We were thrilled at the prospect of expanding our family, but the recent threats weighed heavily on our minds. We decided to keep the pregnancy a secret from everyone except our closest friends and family until we felt more secure. As Emily's due date approached, we took every precaution to ensure a safe and peaceful environment for the birth of our child. When our second son, James, was born, it was a moment of pure joy and relief. Holding him in my arms, I felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination to protect my family at all costs. 3 months after James's birth, just as we were beginning to settle into a routine, the unthinkable happened. It was a typical weekday afternoon. Emily had taken Lily and Ethan to a play date, leaving James and me at home. I was working in my office, the baby monitor next to me, when I heard a strange noise from the nursery. Rushing to the nursery, I found the window open and the crib empty. Panic set in as I realized James had been taken. I called Emily, my voice trembling as I told her what had happened. She raced home, and we immediately contacted the police. The next few hours were a blur. The police arrived, setting up a perimeter and launching a search. They questioned neighbors and scoured the area for any clues. Emily and I were inconsolable, clinging to each other as we prayed for our son's safe return. Days turned into weeks, and despite the extensive search efforts, there were no leads. The despair and helplessness were overwhelming. Emily and I refused to give up hope, but the uncertainty was a constant weight on our hearts. Then, one night, we received an anonymous tip. The caller claimed to know where James was being held. The information was vague, but it was our first real lead. The police advised caution, but Emily and I were desperate. We followed the lead to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The warehouse was dark and foreboding. As we approached, we could hear muffled cries coming from inside. With the police close behind, we entered the building, our hearts pounding. In a dimly lit room, we found James, unharmed but scared. He had been taken by a desperate man trying to extort money from us, believing we were wealthy due to the media attention our family had received. The police apprehended the kidnapper, and we were finally reunited with our son. The relief was indescribable, and we held James close, vowing never to let him out of our sight again. In the aftermath of the kidnapping, our community rallied around us, providing support and comfort. The experience had been harrowing, but it also strengthened our resolve to protect our family and cherish every moment together. Emily and I knew we couldn't control everything that happened in our lives, but we could face each challenge with courage and resilience. Our love for each other and our children would always be our guiding light, no matter what obstacles lay ahead. As we settled back into our routine, we took comfort in the small moments of joy and peace. Our journey had been tumultuous, but it had also brought us closer together. With each passing day, we grew more determined to create a safe and loving home for our children, free from the shadows of the past. And so we continued to move forward, embracing the future with hope and gratitude, knowing that no matter what challenges came our way, we would face them together as a family.